get right into this. So here's our agenda. We're going to go through all these topics, and the best place to start is to really talk about the factors and the trends that are driving the local search opportunity for national brands. So the underlying driver here for a lot of these things we're going to be going over today is that mobile usage is growing, and I think we're all cognizant of that fact, and it's really driving call volume. So currently, smartphone penetration in the U.S. is about 79% and quickly growing. And the majority of searches are happening on mobile devices, according to Google. Now, importantly, about half of those searches have local intent to find something to do or to buy or to see or to eat in one's immediate vicinity. And this is a key foundational point that underlies a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing today. So if we go to the next slide, drilling down further, I put together a mobile ad revenue forecast twice per year, which has turned out to be pretty accurate in the last 6 years or so that I've been doing it, and we're pretty proud of that track record. Now, these are the figures we just released a few weeks ago, and they project mobile ad revenues in the U.S. to go from $22.7 billion in 2015 to almost $62.2 billion by 2020. Now, importantly, the share of that total that's attributed to location-targeted mobile ads is 37%, growing to 43% by 2020, and that has a lot to do with the figures we saw on the previous slide, that mobile usage skews towards local intent, and then lots of other other factors, that we measure. So to unpack that a bit further, if we go to the next slide, to go one level deeper, one of the ways we subdivide that ad spend is by format. And the clear takeaway here is that search is the leading form of mobile advertising and will continue to grow throughout our forecast period. And there are lots of reasons for that, including higher premiums and ad rates when compared with things like traditional display, and also higher performance due to search's intent-driven use case. But what all this really leads up to is the implication for our main topic today of mobile search as a driver of local commerce, because the prevalence of mobile search is important in that it correlates highly to local actions and conversions. So if we go to the next slide, to back that up, here's some data from Google that show that 3 out of 4 mobile searches trigger additional actions and conversions. And those are actions that are things like visiting a store or making a purchase or making a phone call. And these are all very locally oriented actions, but also importantly are highly valued actions from the perspective of advertisers that are looking for tangible return on ad spend. And now taking this a step further, these actions aren't just happening at high volumes, but they're also happening quickly. On this same slide, if we go back to that data slide, you'll see that 55% of purchase-related conversions happen within 1 hour from the initial search. So that tells me that mobile users are indeed lower funnel, high intent consumers. They're literally an hour away from a conversion, and therefore the opportunity to influence them through, different types of messaging to influence their buying decisions is a very high kind of opportunity, and much higher than any other media that we analyze. So if we go to the next slide, what this all kind of spells out is that all signs point to compelling reasons to capture that user intent. The intent is clearly there. So publishers and advertisers who aren't providing optimized content or ads that include actionable cues for users to take action are missing a large opportunity. So if we go to the next slide, what are some of those calls to action? There are lots of them, and they're growing in prevalence as app developers, publishers, and advertisers catch on to these usage realities that mobile consumers are indeed ready to transact. So with that trend, we're seeing a proliferation of action buttons. And one way this has played out is the rise of buy buttons in feed-based social media like Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and Twitter. It seems like everyone has a buy button now. But where this is all going is that because buy buttons only address e-commerce, the much larger opportunity is in driving offline commerce. We've been saying for years that e-commerce only represents about 7% of U.S. retail. The rest is all offline. So based on that, the prediction we've been making is that these action buttons will start to lean more towards driving offline action. So we're already seeing that with Facebook's call button, which you can see kind of animated to the right there. And if you think about it, this stems from what we've already seen for years in things like Google's local extensions that plant these types of calls to action within search results. So we're seeing more and more with functions like message buttons or schedule an appointment or book a reservation, or what Starbucks did to just launch a function where you can order and pay for your coffee before you get there and skip the line, just grab it and go. So there are lots of ways this trend is playing out. But what I'd like to zero in on is one of the highest value functions on that emerging list of calls to action, which is click to call, or call analytics, and what we're calling as an overall field, call commerce. So as you see here on this slide, this comes down to a few basic realities that are causing growth in call volume. And that's correlated to the overall growth in smartphones and mobile engagement. So for one, there's the simple fact that the smartphone bolts a search and discover device with a phone. So it has a native dialer and voice input, so on a hardware level it makes a lot of sense. But not only that, calls are really resulting from the fact that, you know, they're high value, high intent calls from transaction ready consumers, similar to the data I showed earlier. But this is especially true in high consideration and complex purchases such as autos or financial services and healthcare. And there you have categories where there's a level of complexity where it compels talking to another human. And this is also an important point because the value of leads in these particular categories is so high, so it's really a ripe area for monetization. So if we go to the next slide, to further kind of quantify that claim that call volume is indeed growing alongside the overall growth of mobile engagement, here's some more BI/Kelsey forecast data showing mobile call volume. So the top line finding here is that calls driven to businesses from all mobile content formats will total, or actually now total, about 93 billion, but that's going to grow to about 160 billion by 2019. And this includes both mobile app and mobile web. So again here, search is the clear winner in terms of call volume, and that's a function of its intent-based nature, which tends to drive a lot of calls, and also the intuitive handoff from search to call that's being driven by a lot of tools like call extensions in search results. So you can also see here how other mobile formats are trending as call drivers, and I won't go into all of them now, but one notable finding is that social media is the smallest but fastest growing format from which calls will be generated, and that results from the rise of native social ads and things like call buttons I discussed earlier. And that growth will mostly come at the expense of traditional display, where we're seeing relatively flat growth. So if we go to the next slide, building from that call volume data, we've also projected the dollar value of the mobile search-based click-to-call market in the U.S., which is currently $2.45 billion, but growing to about $5.34 billion by 2020. So it's clearly a sizable opportunity, not just in call volume, but in dollars as it continues to develop. Now, if we go to the next slide, one thought I want to kind of leave you with is that, you know, these calls are happening either way. All of the usage trends, the mobile realities are going to send this massive quantity of calls to offline businesses. So it's really only a question of capturing that opportunity. And it's a question of what marketers and publishers and app developers and everyone in this ecosystem can do to get ready for that torrent of calls and treat it as an opportunity to get better data, better sense of ROI, and to make better decisions on an ongoing basis.